Welcome back, my friends. It is time for the Morning Mindset. Are you ready to get your mind aligned with the truth of God? You see, the fact that you're listening tells me your answer is probably yes. You're here to help yourself get your mind right, to get yourself encouraged, get yourself ready for what's ahead in the next 12 to 24 hours. You see, we need this every day, don't we? I know I do. I need to be looking in the Word of God and discerning from it truth from God every single day. It's a personal thing, my friends. And we're going to dive back into 2 Peter chapter 2 today in a very personal way because we've just received a warning. I mean, think about warnings for a moment. We have warning signs on highways that tell us to drop our speed in a construction zone. We have warning signs that tell us when there's a bump in the road or a dip in the road. We have warning signs that give us all kinds of caution. And you see, that perhaps is a more friendly sounding word than warning. Warning sounds kind of abrupt and jarring, but caution is a word that tells us, hey, someone's looking out for you. Someone's caring for you. They listen to what they have to say. And that's really what Peter is doing for us here. He's giving us a caution about false teaching. Let's read 2 Peter chapter 2. And he's talking about the false teachers. He's already introduced the idea of false teachers. And he says, many will follow their sensuality. And because of them, the way of truth will be blasphemed. And in their greed, they will exploit you with false words. Their condemnation from long ago is not idle, and their destruction is not asleep. Now, Peter, as we continue reading, you're going to discover Peter is not a fan of false teachers. He actually has some very harsh words for them. I mean, some of what he said right here is pretty strong. But let's look at the things that he mentions here. He's saying false teachers have the ability to persuade many people. He says many will follow, and they're going to follow what he describes as sensuality. Now, why would a false teaching be considered sensuality? Well, in this case, some scholars suppose or take from this context that Peter means that something about their teaching was appealing to the sensual nature of man, perhaps in a sexual way, perhaps in a very emotional way. And you see, we don't know exactly what their teaching was, so it's hard to give a definitive answer on something like that. But I think it's easy enough for us to recognize, just from the fact that we know ourselves, that anything that appeals to our basest desires for self-esteem, for self-gratification, for pleasure, anything along that line is going to be seductive. I mean, in essence, I just described every temptation that ever comes into our lives, didn't I? They're things that appeal to the deepest needs and fundamental desires of the human heart. And it seems like Peter is saying that these false teachers have figured that out, that every human being is longing for those basic things to be met, and they're taking advantage of that. They're taking the truth of God and twisting it into something it's not to have a control of sorts over those they're teaching. I mean, look at the words he says in verse 3. He says, in their greed, they will exploit you with false words. You see, a false teacher is motivated by what they can get out of this situation for themselves. And I realize that all of us as human beings, on some level, are motivated by that kind of motive. There's a little bit of selfishness in all of us, right? But he's saying that these false teachers, that's their primary motive. That's what they're going for. And it's hard to determine someone else's motives. In fact, we might say it's impossible to do, at least on the surface, because motives are very deep. But Peter's warning to us is a warning of love. He's saying, be ready for the reality, my friends, the reality that false teachers will come our way. Dear Jesus, help us to avoid false teaching. Help us to see it for what it is and to see the false teachers for what they are, and to pray for them and to pray for our own strength in you, that our faith will be well founded.